Today we're going to use watercolor paints to paint our cactuses. Traditionally, watercolors are very liquidy and hard to control, so we're going to be using a pointed brush today. The goal is to try and control our watercolors and not let them flow all over the place. To first start with watercolor, we got to make sure that our brush is really wet and we got to get our paint wet because the paint does not activate until it is moistened with the water. So I'm just going to dip my brush into the water and I'm going to swirl in my color a few times. I'm not going to jam my brush in there like I'm digging for gold. I'm just going to swirl it a couple of times. To apply it to the paper, you're going to use the point of your brush and you're going to outline around your black Sharpie lines first. Now you're trying to stay inside your black Sharpie lines, but essentially you're re-outlining again. This is going to help you keep your colors where you want them and not have them flowing all over the place. So whenever you run out, you're just going to go back and keep going. I'm using the point of my brush. I'm not pressing my brush really hard into my paper. I'm actually very lightly touching it to the paper. I don't have to press to get the color to come off on the paper. A really light touch will do it. So I'm just going to trace around my pencil lines. Trace around my Sharpie lines. So anywhere where there is a line, I'm going to kind of go over it. What this is going to do is my cactus is bumpy. If I want to make it look realistic, like it's actually bumpy, where the bump comes up will be lighter and where it goes down into a groove will be darker. So I'm tracing with my darkest paint over the grooves, and then I'm going to come back in a minute and you'll see with just water and lighten out my paint over the bump parts. This will help my cactus look more realistic and more three-dimensional. So once I trace all the way around the edges of my cactus here, I'm going to get my brush wet and just kind of go over those lines, and you can see my paint's going to start to spread, but it's not going to be as dark as when I'm actually using the paint. So right now I'm just using the water. So I'm just slowly making my paint spread and bleed through the other sections of my paper by just using the water. So the more water you use, the more it will spread. The less water you use, the more contained in its spot it will be. So your goal is to do this with all your cactuses. And you can do this with your patterns on your pot as well. You can do it with the gravel in your pot as well. It's really up to you. But just remember, very light touches. I'm not jamming my brush into the paper at all. I'm just touching the tip of it and going very slow and controlled. The speed on this video is about 3 times faster than what I'm actually doing in real life. So take your time, make it look nice. When you complete a section, notice I moved way down here to the other end of my paper. I'm not going to paint the cactus right next to the cactus I just painted, because what happens when watercolors touch each other? They bleed into each other. So instead of me painting right next to what I just painted, I'm going to skip around and give that paint an opportunity to dry before I try and put another color right next to it. Because no matter how careful you are, it will very likely bleed into the next color if you are not skipping around. So you don't ever want to try and switch and paint colors right next to something you already painted. Another thing that you can do on your cactuses is you can also mix different colors together. So on this one, I'm starting out the exact same way I started my other one. I am going around the outline of that cactus. I'm taking my time. I'm using the point of my brush, not pressing very hard, but just outlining. Now, I'm going to clean my brush off before I go stick it in another color, but I'm going to go swirl into the yellow. Yellow is a color that is next to green on the color wheel, so I could mix that green or that yellow into my green, and it will make my color a little bit different. So instead of just having a green, I'll have a yellow green. So you can't really see it until I go and add the water that's going to make it spread. There it is. You can see that the green is much lighter, more of a yellow green than the original one that I painted. So try and get some different colors going in your cactuses. Try not to make them all the exact same green, but add something to it. The colors that you can choose are basically green and blue, because those are colors that are on either side of green on the color wheel. You wouldn't want to try and do green and red because you will get brown. So you want to use colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. And this is how you will continue. You will outline with your darkest paint, and then you will come back in with the water and let it spread to fill in the rest of the shape.